I'm Miracle Jones, your moderator for today's webinar, which is hosted by the mayor. During the next hour, Mayor Gainey will speak to key themes in his leadership of the city and answer some of your questions regarding his proposed budget for the new year. He's also joined by Deputy Mayor Jake Pollock. So thank you for tuning in for this important discussion. Now let's hear from the man himself, Mayor Ed Gainey, on his administration's vision and how he is putting the resources behind it to continue to grow a city where everyone feels safe, everyone is welcome, and everyone can thrive. Start off the bat, first question. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. In your budget address, you talked about two key themes: making government work and putting government to work for everyone. Why are those two themes so central to your administration, and what do they mean to you?
Well, one, Miracle, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. Having you here means a lot. And I appreciate all the work that you do in the community. So first and foremost, thank you. It's very important that we make government work. When we came in here, government did not work. When we came in on it was a January snowy night. We realized that we didn't have the type of equipment that we need to be able to remove snow from our streets in a timely manner. We also understood the infrastructures of our bridges and how bad of a condition they was 3 weeks later. So a lot of the things that we found out early is why we said we got to get back to our basic services, core city services, in order to deliver for our residents. So it was all about how we as city government build it back up from the ground up. And that's what we've been focused on. And we've been able to accomplish a lot of different things with that, making sure that city services are working properly. And then secondly, I understand what it means to have a city for all. I understand what it means when we talk about making sure that everybody in the city feels included, feels seen, feel believed in, don't want to leave here but want to stay here. We want this city to work for everybody. We want your city government to work for you, a city government that you can believe in. That's extremely important. So one, we had to again, start from the ground up and build our city services back up to be able to benefit every neighborhood in this city. It's not just the affluent neighborhoods that needed to be touched, it's every neighborhood. A city of 90 neighborhoods is one city, and we wanted to make sure that we were putting our resources in a way that every part of our city services could help our residents. That was extremely important. And always want to make sure that people are seen. I don't want people to leave here. We've lost too many people going to other cities because they felt like they couldn't make it here for various reasons. And so those communities that have been left behind, communities that have been left out, I don't want you to feel that way. I want you to believe and know that your government is working for you. So then those two things became our strategies, making government work and making government work for you. And we've been successful at both.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Coming over to you, Jake. The proposed budget appears to center the daily lives of Pittsburgh residents. What role did that play in you finding a way to balance the budget?
It was definitely the driving force between most of the decisions that the mayor made in preparing this budget. And the answer goes back to part of what the mayor was saying about government not working at the beginning of his administration. It's important to think about why that was, right? The city of Pittsburgh left Act 47 financial distress in 2018. We had been almost 2 decades in that status, and before that, for many, many years, the city's finances were in bad shape, and that's what led us to that status. The work that prior administrations did to get the books in order, to get us out of financially distressed status, was really important, and that's why we have a healthy financial situation today, even as there are some challenges on the horizon that I imagine we'll talk about later. But the way that they did that, and really the only way they could do that, was by cutting a lot of our ability to do basic work, right? The number of city employees that we shrank during Act 47 was extraordinary. The number of departments that were consolidated or completely eliminated, the number of programs that were closed. And so while Mayor Gainey entered office with a city that was financially strong, we were still dealing with the legacy of all of those reductions in our ability to make basic services work. And so that's really been the challenge that he's given to us in his administration, and that we've been building towards over the 2 previous budgets that he's introduced, and what we're continuing to work on here, which is how can we leverage the city's improved financial health into restoring services. And so looking at paving, looking at infrastructure, looking at our Department of Public Safety, even some of the internal things we do, like the Department of Finance that processes people's tax payments. We need more people, we need better and improved systems to make that work. We don't always need to spend more money to make improvements, and a lot of the things we're implementing this year are those things that we can do just by getting better and more efficient at what we do. But it was important to center restoring those services to make government work in the way the mayor was just talking about.
And then now on top of that, and I'd like for JP to talk about it a little bit more, we had to deal coming out of a COVID-19 crisis. We were coming out of a COVID-19 crisis, and we had to deal with all the social issues that come with it, the social conditions we had to deal with. So as we talk about all the time, it was a dual crisis. One was the fact that we were coming out of Act 47. There was an enormous cost that was going to be paid for us doing a wonderful job coming out. But also, right after that, we walked right into COVID-19, and then we had to come out of COVID-19. So we had to deal with the conditions that COVID-19 left. And I think that as you and I talked about COVID-19 and what it would mean and how we would solve some of the issues was also proposed in the budget of how we deal with it. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So you're right. The two big impacts that we experienced from COVID were, one, it has really changed the way people with office jobs at least work, right? That whether they're working from home or in a hybrid situation, that's really changed the way that kind of business is done. And in turn, that has a big impact on office space, right? Whether businesses are renting or if they own it, selling office space. We've seen a lot of businesses downtown, less so in other neighborhoods that have an office area, but even still in some of those, making their footprint smaller, having less space. And so we've seen a lot of space in the office market free up. Eventually, that leads to reductions in the property taxes that are paid on those buildings. And so that's had an impact on revenue. And we've had to work on creative ways to address immediately, how to handle that lost revenue. More longer term, how do we stabilize that market and recover some of that tax base?
Not only that, the model had changed, right? The 9 to 5, Monday through Friday is gone.
Correct.
Yeah.
Work is gone. So we've had to deal with that. So now you're going to have less people downtown than what you had before because everybody's working on a hybrid model. So we had to change the dynamic of what we thought about how do we turn downtown into more of a mixed use neighborhood. How do we make it a mixed use neighborhood? How do we get more residents downtown to be able to lead? And I think that's some of the things that we have been doing.
Sure.
Yeah. And I also think that you talked a little bit about that in your State of the City address, which is going to be added to the chat. So if you are tuning in virtually, if you look at your chat, you should see the mayor's State of the City address that was earlier this week was talking about some of these changes. And as we're talking about, coming into a lean year, making changes, it was very important to the both of you not to cut essential services, including street pavings, removing snow, and of course, our bridge maintenance. That is something that's always at the top of the line in people's minds. Why was it so important for your administration to not cut the core services in this upcoming budget, which kind of set you apart from prior administrations?
For the administration, the collapse of the Fern Hollow Bridge was a real wake-up call. I've been in the city for 54 years, and I've never heard of a bridge collapsing. And so to be able to get that call early in the morning that the bridge had collapsed, and then finding out that I couldn't go out there, none of my administration could go out there because the gas line had got severed as well. That caused an alarming fear. And it caused a fear that I never wanted to wake up to again. And so the team got to work immediately to talk about what we had to do to ensure that from our bridges would be safe, because it wasn't just the fact that that bridge collapsed. What were the condition of the other bridges in the city? When were the last time they were inspected? What are we doing to ensure that our bridges are healthy? We had to go through the whole inventory of it, discussing exactly how we were going to deal with our bridges. But several things came from that. Stronger partnership with PennDOT, great relationship with the Southern Pennsylvania Commission, great relationship with the President Biden's administration, who helped us out tremendously, and Governor Wolf. So we not only built relationships, we built relationships to be able to execute in a way that we can get all of our bridges inspected And right now we have 0 bridges in failing condition. Now we have some in some poor condition, but we don't have none in no failing conditions. And just like the recent closure of the Path Holloway Bridge, it wasn't that we wanted to close it, but at the end of the day, I'll close any bridge before risking the lives of anybody in this city. We will not do that again. We will make sure that every bridge is up. When we are complete, every bridge will be in good condition. The one thing that I always say about Jake, when we needed to make sure that we could that we could get the snow off our streets in a timely manner, he went back into the budget. He found enough money to be able to buy 12 vehicles, buy 6 vehicles and rent 6. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to your original question, Miracle, like the real reason why it's important not to cut those services is it's more costly to us in the long run to cut them than to find a way to make them work, right? Whether that's a direct dollar cost, right? If we reduce staffing and an emergency happens, then that ends up costing us more in overtime, and at the same time we're stretching our people to the breaking point. If we don't invest in maintenance on bridges, then we have to deal with major repairs to those bridges when we let them to continue to deteriorate, and that's what we've run into, in this bridge asset management process that the mayor was just describing. Years and years of not doing regular maintenance, not fixing the small things, led to so many of our bridges being in really bad shape and us having to take bigger steps, closing them for longer periods of time, which has an impact on the city, but also on the residents and their ability to get around, right? So it creates bigger challenges if we don't maintain that baseline. In terms of the snow plowing thing that the mayor mentioned, it was as simple as we didn't really have a clear system. We didn't have a standard for how long it would take us from when the snow stopped to when we could tell everyone confidently that we would have treated their street. And that caused a lot of frustration, understandably, a lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty for residents about whether they'd be able to get to school or even if they needed to get to the hospital. So we looked closely at what we needed. Some of that was not having enough vehicles. The lessons we learned there didn't just help us that winter. We still rent trucks, some trucks every winter, to sort of boost up our fleet in the winter and then return them in the summer when we don't need them. So that was something we had never done before that we learned from talking to the people who actually drive the trucks. But we also worked on being more effective in how we routed and how we scheduled people. And that's allowed us to set a baseline of, we will have treated every street within 24 hours of when the last snow fell, and we've hit that mark. Now, sometimes if it's too cold, that means there's salt on the street, and if deep enough, it's been plowed. It might still be melting, so it could be a few more hours, before it's totally clear, but we will have gotten everywhere in that time. That was important to us, just to sort of give people that certainty.
And the best way to learn is always from our frontline workers. Our frontline workers are the ones that really gave us the blueprint of how to improve the overall basic city services.
And so you talk about learning from your frontline workers and taking a proactive approach. That has resulted in the S&P Financial improving the city's overall rating and the city's general obligation debt from a AA- to a AA. There's been a lot of conversations about the city's future. This rating came out and it really shocked people about how it gave confidence with the city's future, these steps you've been taking. What does it really mean, and why was it such a big deal?
Sure. So S&P Financial is one of 3 ratings agencies, and not just for cities, for all kinds of businesses. They provide a rating that basically says how confident can someone who invests in an entity, or in our case, buys our bonds, how confident can they be that they'll be paid back? And that rating scale tells them what they should, what they can expect. Moving from AA- to AA shows an improvement, right? That they think that are already very safe, stable investment. They're ranking even better than it was before, and mostly that's attributable to good, solid financial management practices. They're basically saying the city is financially resilient, right? Even in changing and sometimes challenging circumstances. They were evaluating us for that rating during the period of time when property taxes downtown and elsewhere were being appealed, and we showed them, we were very open book. We showed them that we were seeing declines there and what we thought that meant and how long we thought it would last. But their rating shows that they think that the tools we have in place The way in which we put our budgets together, we don't just look at next year, we look 5 years out to make sure that decisions we make today about tomorrow aren't going to leave us broke 4 years from now. They were confident that by planning in that way, by managing our money in that way, we'll be able to repay the debts we take out. And so they can send a signal to the market that Pittsburgh is a good bet. And that is important to us. It's a good sign of validation to us in what we're doing, but it's an important sign to the rest of the country and the rest of the world that Pittsburgh is a safe place to invest. And it's also a testament to the strength of our local economy. One of the things that they look at is the strength not just of the city itself, but of the the economy in the region and how that will ultimately translate into public revenue. So it's a sign that they also believe Pittsburgh, not just the city government, but the city, is a good bet.
Not only that, I just want to thank Jake and the budget team, to be quite honest, because when we first came in, we talked about us moving into 2 skinny years and what we had to do to prepare for it. And that's why I want to say thank you, because at the end of the day, had they not taken that seriously, it would have been a problem.
Okay. And we're talking about, betting on Pittsburgh. Anyone who's met either one of y'all know y'all love the Department of Public Works. Like, you have talked about them, the front line, but we're moving, like you said, into those skinny, lean years. Mm-hmm. So how do we have the, support for DPW, but also add, plumbing, anti-litter inspectors, and a lot of the coordinators used to combat, illegal dumping and blight? And why is that an important part of your administration to add on to the support to the DPW?
I think, when we came in, we had heard a lot of conversation about DPW being inactive and not being proactive in regards to really being able to perform their jobs. And the morale in that department was extremely low, and that's what we inherited. And what we did is we wanted to show the workers that we would be there for them. And so after every major snowstorm, or before every major snowstorm, we actually went out and got in the trucks. No media attention, no nothing. To ride around with them to discover what it is that they need. But more importantly, it demonstrated to our DPW workers that we would be there for them. We wanted to show them that we would be there for them. We just didn't want to tell them. And then we did some other things to improve morale, such as we changed the whole promotional structure about how people get promoted. So it's just not based on favoritism of who you know, but it's based on the merit and experience that you bring to the table. And we also paid attention to our customers, our residents, who were saying that they wanted to see more anti-litter personnel on the ground. So we added 8 more. Those are things that's going to make the city better, because that's what the people wanted to see. We also knew we had to have a gentleman that could be a master plumbing, so that he could have more plumbing apprentices. We had to make sure that we did that. We didn't have that before. We inherited, we improved that. So when I talk about DPW, they went from a department that most people talked about in the negative to a department that everybody's talking about in the positive. And so the reason why they're big for me is because they allowed us, and they believed in us, and they let us lead. And in doing so, what occurred was they began to believe in themselves. So now when I'm in the grocery store, I don't hear the negativity about DPW. You know what I mean? One of the things that we always talk about that you don't hear about too much no more, and particularly in our 311 calls, is potholes. In every administration I've been in, every city government that I was a part of, one of the number one conversations was potholes. I think DPW's done a marvelous job of making sure they take care of the potholes in the city. And so it's not a burden on the budget, and JP can tell you how we finagled that budget to make that happen. But in regards to executing to be able to deliver better service to our residents, I'm very proud of DPW.
So there are a couple parts to that answer. One is these are things we've been planning for, right? So we knew it was a priority from the very beginning, right, that we get better at enforcement around, it's called the Property Maintenance Code, but basically, litter, dumping, just sort of unclean conditions on empty lots, right? And we've been building up our capacity to do that. We've expanded some of the capacity in PLI to do enforcement of that in prior budgets. But we have something called the Gold Plan that the folks in environmental services in DPW have been working on for a long time around combating dumping. So there's a lot of thought that went into this before this year. We knew that we were eventually going to have to grow the inspection staff in DPW to look for those things and to identify the violations. So we've been scaling up to bring those folks on for a while. It was something that we had targeted a couple of years ago to be prepared to do. The other is honestly, with some of the culture change that the mayor's talking about in DPW and in being proactive and thinking about, how can we do more, not necessarily with more resources. Their budget proposal for this year created all of those new positions you mentioned without increasing their total amount of spending. They've been reorganizing over time the way that they're staffed, identifying positions they don't need anymore because things have gotten more efficient. So we were able to create all of those new positions without increasing the total amount of spending, just by constantly looking at ways to improve performance.
And when you start promoting people in a way that they see that people can get promoted on their abilities to be, on their experience and merit, it changes the morale of the department. The leaders that we got in place now, they're leaders. People follow them. People want to be with them. These were the leaders that they wanted to see. And the leadership is now diverse. So now people believe no matter what part of the city you come from, you have an opportunity to be in leadership. And that's an amazing thing.
And we talk about expanding. Another thing that you have done is bring in community, especially when it comes to public safety. And so we're going to move on to that topic. You have created 5 violence interruption programs to connect residents at risk to resources before they become victims of gun violence or cause gun violence. You have also done law enforcement assisted diversion and co-response programs and police community engagement work. Why has it been so important for your budget to maintain and expand improvements to residents so that they can see improvement to public safety?
Let's talk about the budget and I'll talk about why we do it.
Sure. So, in terms of funding for public safety, obviously that is one of the critical baseline responsibilities of local government. So whether that's EMS, fire, police, OCHS, right? It's one of the things that we know is a top priority for residents and something that's really important that we take responsibility for. I think a lot of our investments, there are new investments there, have been in the Office of Community Health and Safety, which was it was 2 years old, but it really had not gotten off the ground when Mayor Gainey's administration started. That's now a staff of 40 people, and we're making proposals to grow that in the new year that focuses on those non-carceral or non-law enforcement responses, because so many of the challenges that we've seen in this space, whether that's people who kind of are in trauma or in need, a police response isn't really the appropriate response for that. But that was taking up a lot of police officers' time. And that made it difficult for police officers to then focus on their core job and what they're trained in and what they've sworn to do, which is address violent crime and other more serious things where their more serious incidents where their particular expertise is more important. So we've been able to see some realignment there through co-response and law enforcement assisted diversion. We're able to rely on social workers and other trained behavioral health professionals to address the needs of folks in crisis, the unhoused, deal with those issues in an appropriate way. At the same time, we're taking steps to then free up the time of officers, whether it's in not going to those kinds of calls or not having to spend so much time there, or in not taking on administrative tasks that could be done by civilians, so that we can really focus that resource on what it's intended for.
We wanted to make sure that we respond in a humanity type of approach. So we wanted to be proactive. So when you talk about the violence interrupters, they're the people that's downtown working with our children, trying to make sure that the children are not fighting, that it's not escalating to any serious violence. They're the ones that's working in our school districts because they want to make sure that if we're proactively stopping violence before it occurs, then we're saving lives. We have almost close to a 50% reduction in youth homicides in the city. That's amazing. And a lot of times nobody hears about our violence interrupters and the work that they do because you only hear about them if something goes wrong. But let's just think about the lives they saved throughout the year. When I say there's a major reduction in youth homicides, That's amazing to me. And then you just heard Jake talk about the fact that even with our OCHS, when we came in, we didn't have nobody. 2 years with nobody. Now we got over 40. They're out there dealing with people in a humane way to deal with people that's overdosing, where they can talk to them, where they can have conversation. Now they're being paired with police. Once the police go and see the scene, if the scene is not in a situation where it's dangerous, there's no commission of crime, they turn it over to the social worker. The social worker talks to the person to find out from a behavioral or social issue exactly what that person needs, and they get that person help. If we can help people, then we don't have to worry about the arrest. We're putting them in situations where at the end of the day, they're getting the level of assistance that they need in order to improve themselves. And then our courtrooms, our law enforcement, our criminal justice system could pay more attention to the violent crimes than anything else. So when we talk about humanity and doing things from a humane approach, that's what it's about. Having patience to be able to execute in a way that shows the humanity of our city.
When we talk about the humanity of the city, one of the conversations is always going to turn to people who are experiencing homelessness and houselessness. And while we understand the city is not the holder of the financial support to address solely with issues of the in-house, you have been doing a lot of work with the community health and safety, Office of Community Health and Safety, and supporting vulnerable citizens, including with the brand new reopening of the 2nd Avenue Commons. In what way will the budget continue to make sure this humane approach still gets to go forward?
Some of the things that we're proposing in the budget are expanding our both our co-response program and our Roots program to all zones. So right now, as they've been scaling up, those programs have only been operating in the police zones that have the highest need, which are zones 1, 2, and 5. 1 is the north side, 2 is downtown, most of the Hill District, and then up into sort of Bloomfield and Lower Lawrence, into Lawrenceville. And then 5 is the East End, Homewood, Lincoln, Leamington, Belmar, Highland Park, that part of town. So we would be expanding that to cover the rest of the city and increasing those services in providing them everywhere that they're needed. Another way that work is continuing to move forward is through collaboration, like you mentioned, with the Allegheny County Department of Human Services, where we work together to identify ways that we can meet the needs of our unhoused residents or people in crisis otherwise and get them connected to services. And in the context of the unhoused, they are, DHS is making significant investments in additional both emergency shelter and longer-term facilities for placement. The 500 and 500 initiative, which is something that the city is a supportive partner to the county in, is really increasing options for people who are presently experiencing homelessness to have options for places to go. The way we support that is through our outreach teams, through OCHS, and even the violence interrupters, because sometimes when they're doing that work, they discover that part of the reason that is leading someone to engage in potentially violent behavior is housing insecurity, right? Any way that we connect with someone where we identify that as part of the solution, we have the tools to connect them, to the county and to those supports.
And coming in the office, we didn't have a plan for the homeless. The city didn't have a plan for the unhoused population. There was no plan. And we don't control, as you heard Jake say, we don't control the money. We, Department of Health and Human Service does. So we had no plan. We don't have access to the funding. What we control is fire, police, and EMS. So we had to think about how, one, we build a stronger relationship with the county so that we can ensure that the funding that they're using is helping us as we develop a plan as we go. So we don't like to develop plans and just put them on the shelf. We like to execute the plan. So everything you've seen in regards to how we help the unhoused community is because when we came in, we started to build this plan. And so when you think about OCHS and what they do out there with the people that's not only ODing, but they go out there, they talk to the homeless community every single day. They're out there, they're providing with the services that they need. They're connecting a relationship. Sarah Anna Morado, I want to thank her. They're connecting a relationship. And Erin Dalton, I want to thank her as well. We're creating a relationship where we were actually out there working together. We had lost Second Commons for a minute when it burned down. Now it's back up, and we're in a situation right now where you just heard Jake talk about it. We're in a situation where we can almost offer everybody, some shelter that is dignified, that is decent, and that they can feel good about.
And that's it, just really quick, a good example of how that approach has changed over time, right? At the beginning, homelessness increased significantly at the end of the pandemic, right? It actually increased a lot during the pandemic, but there was emergency federal aid and federal shelters that people were staying in. So we, at local government or just city residents, driving through town or on the street, they didn't really see the increase until the quarantine period ended and those federal shelters closed, federally supported shelters closed, and folks started showing up, camping, sleeping rough, camping on the streets. So at that point, we were at a huge deficit of places to, refer people to. And so our approach had to be, how can we work with communities and with unhoused communities, to make sure that everybody was safe, everybody was accommodated, right? How can we work with these folks to make sure that their conditions are as dignified as possible? We provided porta-johns in some places. We provided trash cleanup, sharps boxes. We did a lot of work to sort of make those conditions humane and dignified. As more housing options come online, we're able to take things a step further and make more of those connections to credible offers of housing, and that's really where our efforts are focused right now.
That's a perfect segue, because now we're going to talk about affordable housing. All right, so y'all have talked about the need for affordable housing and the need to change zoning amendments to make Pittsburgh the most livable city for all. We know there's been multiple research studies that said housing actually cuts violence and crime, like you talked about earlier. So in your speech, you mentioned the city's affordable housing bond that will allow more than $30 million in affordable housing construction and preservation projects over the next 3 years, and the Choice Neighborhoods Implementation Grant in the Hill. How does the bonding grant impact your budget and the city's ability to make affordable housing possible?
Well, I think, one, it's the first time in the history of the city that we even have a affordable housing bond. I think that's amazing all by itself. We've lost a lot of population, and it was displaced through gentrification. This right here provides us the opportunity, whether we talk about construction or preservation, to ensure that we have affordable housing in the city. And I always think that the more affordable our city is, the better it is, the more families move in, the more we stabilize. And this bond gives us the opportunity to be able to utilize it. Plus the additional housing that the URA has approved through its board, 1,000 units worth of housing in the past 3 years, is either in the pipeline or coming up. That's another big one. Then you talked about the neighborhood choice, the second one. I was part of the first one in Larimer, the second one. And this is why that's a big one for me. All 411 units will be replaced. That means nobody gets displaced, nobody. Then we got another 211 that we're building of affordable housing in the Hill. Then we got another 202 that'll be market rate in the Hill District. So you're talking about a housing market in the Hill District that they've never seen before, not one like this. And then you can also talk about the fact that at the end of the day, we still got 12 competitive low-income housing tax credit deals from the state. That's unprecedented. We've never done that before. This city has never seen that. In the last 2 funding rounds, we got 6 apiece. That's 12 low-income tax credit deals from the state. That speaks volumes of, and it validates us in many ways to say that our administration knows exactly what we need to do to invest. And secondly, they believe in the URA. The leadership that we had to restore in the URA. When we walked in, URA was void of leadership. Now when you look at Shushila and what they're doing over at the URA, people are believing again. So not only are we building affordable housing, we're also building belief from our financiers, from the state and everybody and everywhere else, that we can put the money where we say we can put the money. And I think that's a major accomplishment. But I also want to go back to something that we didn't talk about, because I want to make sure that the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership and the rest of them get a lot of credit. Oh, that's your next question? Oh, okay, all right.
Well, we can go ahead and move into it like organically.
No, I just wanted to say that it was also a way to bring partners together downtown. So when I talk about Jeremy from the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership, he did the ambassador program. That means we got more eyes on the street. The more eyes that we had on the street, the more knowledge we were receiving about what was going on and how we could better deploy our activity to be able to prevent some of the negativity that was happening. Secondly, we did the clean teams. All the clean teams started to work together. The contractors from PDP, Department of Public Works, and the business and some of the business community downtown, their staff, they all started working together. There was greater collaboration. And when that started to occur, at the end of the day, you started seeing more cleaning going on downtown. You start seeing more things occur that wasn't occurring before. So when I just want people to understand that it's a holistic effort. It's everybody working together. It's a collaboration. It's the city, yeah, we led it, we conveyed it, we moved it. But without partners to be able to execute in their own lane, we don't get half of the things done. And so for me, that's extremely important that people know that it's not just about what got occurred, it's the leadership of collaboration that brought people together to really improve the situation downtown and in our neighborhoods.
And talk about downtown. A couple of things I want to follow up on, because you answered the first couple of questions that I had about it.
Oh, my fault.
No, I like it. So we can answer more, and I'm going to actually, with this question, bring in Alexander Payton, who also bring in his question. He's not going to come on. I'm just going to read his question. But we're talking about downtown, and you have the $600 million investment mentioned a couple of weeks ago to benefit residents. A lot of people fear downtown because of some of the media perceptions and portrayals. And we know Pittsburgh has had a storied history when it comes to perceptions and portrayals. It's an actual study of downtown. So how, as we're going about reviving downtown, how are we also reviving the connections to media, and how do you see media playing a part in the role of talking about downtown?
Jake, why don't you take this first?
Well, so the answer to the question about downtown, or any question about downtown, really goes back to what we were saying earlier, what the mayor brought up about the end of the pandemic, right? When that shift in the patterns of how people worked, how they commuted to work or didn't commute to work happened, right? That did a lot of things. I mentioned earlier how that changed tax collection from those businesses. The other thing it did, it just really changed the experience on the street being downtown, right? A lot fewer people all throughout the quarantine period. That was, downtown was basically empty, and we didn't see, it come back like a light. People slowly started coming back into the office, so downtown was not nearly as full and vibrant, during the workday as it had been before, and that fed perceptions of it being unsafe. The ratio of people who were commuting to their office job and people who had become unhoused during the pandemic, who were, trying to make a go of it downtown, right? It was very different than when they left before the pandemic. And so, there were certainly safety incidents. I don't want to discount that. A lot of it, though, was perception, right? It was just that changed experience. And so that was something that we really had to confront. Mm-hmm. The mayor talked about the ambassador program in partnership with the PDP. We obviously, as he mentioned in his speech yesterday, created a downtown-specific police detail that was utilizing a community-oriented approach, which is not something we've certainly done in neighborhoods, but was not something the city had done downtown before. It was new to downtown. Officers on foot patrol, talking to business owners, connecting with people, certainly deploying Roots and the rest of the OCHS team to address the needs of those unhoused residents downtown, right? Just sort of what can we do to keep these perceptions justified, and in some cases not, of a lack of safety from preventing downtown from reactivating. And we've largely seen success with that, right? I mean, again, we're not back to Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, probably never will be, but the reactivation of downtown has been significant. The next phase that the mayor was also starting to talk about, and you asked about in your question, Miracle, is how do we reimagine downtown
Correct.
for the future? And that includes a lot more housing. Downtown Pittsburgh is an outlier of downtowns across the country in terms of how little residential there is downtown, because we've always been such a city of neighborhoods. And that means that we've always been basically that 9 to 5 city in the downtown. And we need to sort of shift that model so that we have people downtown all the time for different things. The cultural district and others have certainly invested heavily over a long period of time in nightlife here, but we can make that move, and that's where our investments through the URA, the state's investments, the private sector's investments, all triggering a total of $600 million of investment in downtown over the next few years will be critical.
And I see the perception changing. Like I said, when we come in, there wasn't no plan. We created these plans as we continue to want to see growth in our city. That was our number one goal. And so when we started the cleanup, as Jake talked about, the police patrol downtown to ensure that people felt safe, there was also something else going on. We knew that when I came in, I talked to the Roonies about wanting to see the NFL draft here. I believe that this is a city that is deserving of the NFL draft. And when the NFL draft started to bring people in to vet our city, to find out if this was a place that they wanted to bring their brand, I remember getting a call from the Rooney saying, listen, we've been selected in 2026. The NFL is going to come and do the draft here. That was a change because you had an outside agency that came in with $1 billion brand that were going to determine whether we were eligible based on the perception of safety in our city, based on the perception of whether people feel welcome, and based on the perception of they believe that when people came here, this was a city that they wanted to really demonstrate exactly the impact that they could have on the world. That's a major change. And then when you, for 2 years, me, Stephanie Pashman, Allegheny Conference on Community Economic Development, with Sarah Anna Murado and others, working together to create, as you heard Jay talk about, the reimagining of what downtown could be. When you talked about that happen, we worked on it for 2 years. It was the first time in this region's history that you had the business community, elected officials, foundations on one page. When we took that strategy to the state, it was the first time that it happened. Even the governor said, I've never seen this coming out of the West, out of the East. It was proper. That's what happens out East. They always go together. But for us, it was the first time. And I got to thank I got to thank Governor Shapiro, because at the end of the day, not only did he believe in our plan, he delivered the resources. And now we have 7 conversion projects coming downtown that's going to convert office space into residential units. When you look at the cultural district downtown, it's back. I mean, every show is packed. When you look at the restaurants downtown, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, they are booked to capacity. All those are positive signs that people are coming back to town, enjoying downtown, enjoying the activities, and then also wanting to live downtown. So the investments that we're making will create just what Jake talked about, that round-the-clock activity, because people won't just be coming downtown to enjoy the amenities. They'll be living downtown, so they'll be part of the new community called downtown.
And to bring that back to the budget, right? There's financial support for all of those initiatives in this budget proposal, right? Ongoing funding for the DPW workers that are part of the clean teams, ongoing funding for the OCHS work downtown, ongoing funding for the police substation. Also, more one-off type things like our participation in some of the collaborative projects with the PDP to support mobile restrooms as part of this proposal. All of these things connect back to our paying towards URA staffing that supports their participation in those planning efforts. If you look at some of the other things, the wider aperture, we have scheduled investments alongside that Choice Neighborhoods project out of our CDBG funding that are part of this allocation. The way that we can continue all of this work that the mayor was just speaking about is by this appropriation plan, keeping those vital pieces in play.
And we also want to give a shout out to Bill Demchek of PNC, because he helped us build our public safety building downtown. That also is a place where our law enforcement officers go. We got a building right there in the middle of town, and without PNC's help, that would not be there. So that's something else that helps stabilize the downtown community. Again, it's about partnership, it's about collaboration, bringing people together and everybody playing a role to find out how we can improve the overall quality and health of our city.
And talking about the overall quality and health, I'm going to add some more questions here. You talked about, your administration's ability to create progress on diverse business participation while starting a new disparity study to fulfill the promise of the city's procurement practices and DBE program, along with a renewed focus on workforce development and publicly funded projects. and apprenticeship programs, such as you mentioned with the gentleman in Troy, who you mentioned, why this is so important is making an impact. Why is it important for you to make room in your budget for these type of initiatives? And for Dr. Asia, I'm going to add to it, what is the pipeline to work for the city? Are you creating an employment pipeline so people who want to invest in this expansion of the city can come and work for the city?
That's a good question. Why don't you take the pipeline? I'll take
Well,
it.
there are always jobs in the city government, and some of them are new ones, that have been added in prior budgets. You mentioned Miracle earlier, those new inspection jobs that we were proposing. If this budget passes, and if it goes into effect next year, we'll be posting for those positions, or the police civilian positions working in the zones, working in the evidence room. So yes, the city government is always creating jobs. And anyone who's interested in applying, by the way, should go to pghjobs.net. That's where you can see all of the current available positions for the city. In terms of a pipeline within the city, this is something that over every budget we've been refining, which is how can we build career progressions in our departments so that someone who comes in the door at an entry-level job can move up, if they choose to stay with the city, move up and have access to a career in public service. I always tell the story of Jen Gula, our director of finance. Her first job for the city was as a cashier in the finance department, right? The very, very frontline sort of, most entry-level job in the department. She's progressed all the way to be the director of finance and the treasurer of the city of Pittsburgh over a long career in public service. So those opportunities do exist here, and we're trying to build more of them. In PLI, we set up sort of a graded system where you come in as a new inspector with the sort of basic minimum requirements for certifications to do some of the simplest residential inspections, and you can build over time. Building pipelines into, whether it's into the city or into construction jobs or other types of jobs, is really more the work of the Workforce Hub, our partnership with Partner for Work, and all the things we're doing to invest in that whole opportunity infrastructure ecosystem, some of which could result in you working for us, and some of it could result in working for somebody else. And Mayor, you probably would be able to talk about that better
we
than
wanted
me.
to make sure that performance was elevation. And that if we remove some of the barriers that was in the way, that people would have an opportunity to actually move up in their department that they're in, which hadn't happened because it was all done by favoritism. So this provided an opportunity to make sure that when we were creating these pipelines, we did it based on the fact of your experience, your expertise, and your ability to execute in a way that demonstrates great quality of service to the city. When we talk about our MBE program coming in, our MBE program, it was an MBE program, but it wasn't going anywhere. Like, there was no foundation for us to move anything, and MBEs were not being selected, at a rate that demonstrated the percentage based on the city that we're in. We needed to improve that. So we got to work right away. We start changing some of the things in the procurement process to ensure that at the end of the day, MBEs would have an opportunity. This is the first time in the history of this city, that we got 3 minority prime contractors on major construction jobs, where we're over 50% of subcontractors dealing with minority businesses. The first subcontract certified as an LGBTQIA business. We've done everything possible to move it forward because we want everybody to believe that you don't have to leave here like many have in order to make it. That the city is open. If public purchasing is supposed to be a competitive bid in which everybody has the proper opportunity to be able to participate and show your knowledge and show your wills, we want you to be able to do it here. We also got selected from the White House as being a workforce development hub, one of 5 cities. So that created a situation through Felicity that would give us the opportunity to have the Pittsburgh Good Job Principles, which led to making sure that in underserved communities, we were doing what was right to make sure that if we were doing business and spending public money in those communities, that those people in those communities had an opportunity to participate on those jobs. And we've done that. So we've continued to improve the overall quality of, one, our MBWB system. 2, is we also made sure that at the end of the day, we were investing in the people that lived in those communities to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to succeed in this city.
One of the most exciting components of that, Mayor, is the Pittsburgh Prosperity Project.
Absolutely.
Which is also, it's an investment in the wraparound supports that people need once they've gotten a good job to keep that job. How do you handle childcare or transportation needs?
Culture.
Workplace culture, right? Like the kinds of soft skills or outside supports that are separate from the paycheck that are necessary to thrive in a job as you're trying to make a transition like that. And that's launching in January in partnership with local philanthropy, and we're just really excited about that as a support to people that are getting training right now through some of the investments that we've worked with Partner for Work in the White House on. When they get into the workforce, how do we make sure we continue to wrap our arms around them and set them up for success?
I know that we are coming down to time. I'm not sure how much time we have, but one of the questions we did get was from Brandon, who wanted to know, how is the city looking to increase walkability, and is there any way that there can be a sidewalk leading at the Crane Ave in Beachview? Is that something that's in the city's purview?
See, we should have had Cal here, right? Cal should be here for this one right here.
But is that possible? And Randall asked about the budget. How will the firing range, the money in the budget for the firing range, be spent? Sure. Saving the spicy ones for last.
So walkability, big picture, is certainly a priority for us. And again, in this budget, we are continuing to fund something that started as a pilot program a few years ago, which is a better way of dealing with replacing sidewalks where they're in bad shape. One of the tricky things about that is the sidewalk in front of a house or in front of a business is actually the property owner's responsibility, not the city's. We put in and maintain the sidewalks that are in front of like public property, one of our own buildings, or that are next to a park, things like that. So we don't have full control of the sidewalks. But we discovered that was a barrier to having them in good condition, because we could fix our pieces of the puzzle, and if somebody in between didn't do theirs, then the network didn't thrive. So we've found ways where we can offer residents and business owners that the city will fix their sidewalks too as part of a complete project, and they can pay based on their means, right, through their tax bill. And that allows us to fix bigger stretches and make big improvements. We're mostly focused right now on routes to school, so where there are a lot of school kids walking on the sidewalk to get to school. I don't happen to know, I know where Crane Avenue is, but I don't know off the top of my head if that's on the list, because again, we're targeting schools right now, but it's definitely something that we're aiming towards.
But we started in Arlington. We did a great job of making sure that our sidewalks were done in Arlington and offering the residents over there an opportunity based on their means of what they could provide to make sure that their sidewalks got done too. We also did some in Homewood. We did some in Homewood on ensuring that the sidewalks there were fixed for kids to be able to go, that we own, for kids to be able to walk back and forth to school. And ask the neighbors there that wanted to join in the program how we could assist them. So that's one. What was your other question?
The money for the firing range. How was that?
The firing range. So.
That
you
is,
talk about it right now?
Yeah, sure. So
Talk about it?
yeah, it's in the budget. There are two pieces to this.
It's in the budget.
it's in the budget. It's public.
Yeah.
But it's our last question because we have to wrap.
Gotcha. So two pieces to that. One, there's funding in the budget for an overhaul of the existing police firing range, which would essentially rotate it so that the direction that the officers, when they're doing their training or firing, doesn't have as much noise spill over to the surrounding neighborhoods. It kind of directs the noise towards the river where there aren't obviously houses. And then there's funding for the longer term play, which is building a new comprehensive public safety training facility at the former VA site that will include an indoor range. So no sound issues there once we're able to move it indoor, but that will be a multi-year process. So in the meantime, we're making changes to reduce the impact on residents.
Well, that has been an informative hour. And so, Mayor Jake, you have equipped us with a lot of very important information, and you have done your part in preparing the budget. What role do we, the residents, play in making sure this crosses the finish line, and what is the best way for us to get involved?
Miracle, thank you again. I can't thank you enough for doing this. Let's give her a hand. Was she good? Was she good?
Great job, Miracle.
My administration, I have done our part in delivering a budget to Pittsburgh City Council that is not only balanced fiscally, but one that takes into account the needs of our residents. I'm hoping that the council, in its wisdom, will pass my budget intact, since we've done all the hard work of keeping core services while providing initiatives that will benefit all 90 neighborhoods. We focused on delivering safe neighborhoods, more affordable housing, stronger and safer infrastructure, while ensuring that everyone has the ability to find good paying jobs that will sustain their family and allow Pittsburgh to remain a place that they call home. So here's what we need you to do. We understand that to gain one thing is to lose another is of equal importance if we only think of what we want, but we got to think about what we want that's best for all of us. So our city is fiscally strong. The next 2 lean years ahead we will get through, but here's what I need. Call your council person. Come to the budget hearings. Come and hear for yourself exactly how we're building a city for you. These are your tax dollars. And I want you to play a major part in understanding how we are shepherding and being good stewards of your tax dollars. The resources, these are your resources. That's why we've invested so much into our city, our basic city services. But if you like what you heard here today, if you want to know more, you heard them talk about earlier that the budget was the budget was online. Please read the budget. If there's any questions, you can give us a call. But more importantly, please come to the hearings. The hearings begin on December the 10th, and the final vote is on December 17th. We want your voice to be heard because you matter to us. We do this for you. And so at the end of the day, give your council person a call if you like what you heard. Tell them to support all that is included in my budget. Thank you for taking the time to listen and be here with us tonight. I appreciate you, and may God continue to bless this city.
And so I want to thank you again, Mayor, Deputy Mayor. Really appreciate y'all. And again, to the audience, I do apologize. We were not able to get to every single question. But like the mayor said, you can reach out to your council person, or you can reach out to the office to have a follow-up conversation. We want to make sure we get out there and get engaged so this budget does get passed. Before we go, is there any last words either one of you have?
No, just, again, I want to reiterate that I would love for the public to really come to these come to the council hearings on this budget. I really want people to be engaged. A lot of times we take it for granted, but I don't want us to do that. I want people to come out and hear for themselves what's in this budget. It's good city basic core services, and we want to make sure that everybody knows about it.
Well, thank you both for joining me tonight. And this has been a very informative meeting, and we want to thank you so much for joining. To learn more about the state of the city and the upcoming budget hearings, remember December 10th to December 17th. So thank you so much, Pittsburgh. Have a great evening.